Hello, and good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you're joining us in the world or what time you're tuning into this recording. Thank you for coming along to listen to our talk on digital curiosity, making the impossible possible as part of this year's Festival of Ideas programme. I'm Susan Halfpenny, and I work in the Digital Scholarship and Innovation team at the University of York, and I'm joined today by my colleagues.
Jesper, I also work at the University of York in the same team.
And Siobhan Dunlop, I work with Susan and Steph.
Okay, and for the next 40 minutes or so, we're going to explore digital curiosity and making the impossible possible. So without further ado, we'll get started then. So when we were preparing for this talk, we were reflecting on last year. So at last year's Festival of Ideas, we did a talk, same group of people, but our topic was different. It was the future of reality. And when we were reflecting back on this, back in when we were preparing for this presentation, we're thinking about how that was maybe a cynical exploration of the possible futures presented by new, emerging and existing technologies. As part of that talk, we were looking at how technologies had the potential to fracture our shared reality, our shared sense of purpose. There was no standard Google anymore. We were all viewing different versions of the world. And as part of this, we even journeyed into the area of the future being that of surveillance and control. But when we came to look at our presentation this year, we were thinking about digital curiosity. We thought about, have our perceptions of the technology changed? Actually, a year on, do we now have a new appreciation for this technology? So here in the UK, we've been through multiple lockdowns in the past 12 months. You know, we were in lockdown last time we recorded, we did it in this kind of way. That was all new to us. Now we've gone through these multiple lockdowns. And as part of this, we've come to realise how much we rely on technology. We relied on it before, but now we completely rely on it. So it started being technology was there so that it was our enabler for socialising, meeting up with friends, family and loved ones via video conferencing. So we're all on Zoom. So Zoom went from having under 1 million users to having 13 million users, and that was just by April 2020. It's probably got even more now. So we all started doing video conferencing, didn't we? Maybe you weren't using Zoom, maybe you were using WhatsApp video calling or any other version of that. Maybe you're using FaceTime. We started using that video call so we could connect with our friends and family. Another thing we started doing then in lockdown is, and we were doing it before, but maybe more so, was we started to be these creators of content and consumers of content on video sharing platforms. So maybe you were sharing your dances on TikTok or watching other people's dances on TikTok, or maybe you were watching YouTube and you were doing your PE with Joe Wicks in the morning. You know, we were all getting active and sharing our experiences or viewing other people's experience to have that shared sense of purpose in our lockdown lives. And then also, as well as this connection with the reality, we were using digital technologies as a means of escape. So maybe it was Animal Crossing. It was all about Animal Crossing, wasn't it? I mean, it was one of the biggest selling games, this Animal Crossing. I mean, I've not used it. You can probably tell from how I'm saying, but I had my version of escape because I had my Jurassic World where I could go into that and join this land of fantasy and interact with people there, but in a completely new world. So we had this new curiosity, this new sense of joy maybe that digital technologies provided us with.
Oh, new. None of this is new though, is it? It's all quite old, really. I mean, you're talking about doing your exercises with Joe Wicks, and I remember doing my exercises in front of the telly with like Mad Lizzie and Green Goddess back in the 1980s on breakfast television. That's nothing new. And you know, even the technologies that you mentioned. So Zoom has been with us since what, 2012? I've got a screenshot here of what Zoom looked like in 2012, and you can see that it's. I added the elephant there. The elephant wasn't on the Zoom website, but everything else here was. And people were using it. Not many people were using it compared to now. But Zoom allowed you the ability to communicate with other people across the internet, stick a feed onto YouTube, stuff like that. I've seen Zoom being used, but it's not until suddenly we've got a bit of a crisis. We need to be able to communicate with other people in groups like this. Here we are now in our Zoom. Until that happened, we didn't really make use of this technology. Even Animal Crossing that you mentioned there, that again, it's not new. The original Animal Crossing game was in 2001. So we've had 20 years of Animal Crossing. And it's only now that certain people have been able to use Animal Crossing in the way that they have to kind of connect with other people and do all of this stuff that you keep going on about. But it's not new. It's old. And actually, a lot of the technology that we think about as being current and exciting and wildly wonderful that defines the modern age is old technology. It's technology that's been around for ages. I mean, we've got, back in the 80s, we had all of this stuff here. We had, I could go around with my personal stereo listening to my music. I could take photos and even get an instant photograph out of it. I could, I might even have had a little mobile television that I could take around and get a fuzzy picture of. Telephones everywhere, so I can make a call whenever I was out. And even if I've got a teletext enabled television, I can get news flashes coming through. I can find out information on demand. So a lot of the technology that we rely on today is stuff that we've had for decades. It's just that now that technology has been subsumed and has been collated within this kind of black mystical rectangle, the telephone. So the mobile phone that we all carry around in our pockets is so much technology. I've got the Walkman in here. I've got my entire record collection. I'm not even limited to the cassettes that I can stick in my bag. Everything's on Spotify or whatever, and it's coming through to my phone. I've got teletext, or actually I've got the internet. I've got the ability to take a photo of you lot and get an instant photo, and I can actually do loads of exciting things with that photo. So technology that used to be huge and not very portable has been shrunk down into something that is much more useful for us. And I'm not going to go carrying around a computer with me because I need to plug it into the wall. I need to be able to get data into it and connect it with a monitor and stuff. And it's huge and really not very easy to get about the place. But as soon as that technology is shrunk, and as soon as the ability to be able to pull up things like the internet and whatever other bits and pieces I've got on here, as soon as that happens, and I can carry it around in my pocket, it becomes useful. It becomes something that defines our modern age. But it's not new. It's just portable.
Okay, so it's not new. We've got that. I think we've really got that, haven't we? It's not new. We've got these phones. But what else have we got right now? Let's set the current technological scene a little bit. Let's have a think about what we've got now, because we can only be curious about technology if we've got a bit of awareness of it. So let's have a look. So we've got the phone. We've set that in store. What else have we got? Well, some people, if you're very lucky, you might have had a go in one of these, maybe a virtual reality or VR headset. So that's the ability to basically see a kind of 3D world around you without seeing the rest of the world. It goes over your eyes like some swimming goggles, basically, and you can look around and you can see things. So it's a real chance for an escape into a different world, a digital world, something a bit different. And that is technology that's quite exciting, that's often used for things at the moment because it's something new and interesting, and it brings a new perspective, a very different perspective, because you don't see everything else. And what else have we got? Well, that you can wear that on your head, a bit like swimming goggles. Well, we can also wear sort of fitness trackers and smartwatches now, and we can have all sorts of things just on our wrist. You can have a little personal trainer on your wrist. You can track your exercise. You can check the weather. You can have a little route so you can go somewhere. There's all sorts of things you can have just worn on your body. A little bit of technology going around with you. That's quite exciting. That's something quite good, I think. What else have we got? Well, let's move on away from wearables. Let's think about more broadly. I'm going to go back to something else that is, again, an old idea made real. So let's have a little look at something we called AI. You might have heard of it. It's mentioned a lot, often in a negative way. Maybe the idea it's going to take over the world or something. And where did that idea come from? Well, it's come from the past. It's come from things like HAL in 2001: A Space Odyssey, which is a film from 1968, which still colors our idea of what artificial intelligence is. So we have this idea of it, and what artificial intelligence basically is trying to replicate human thought and intelligence and learning in computers. So instead of computers normally, you just give them some instructions. It's trying to replicate a bit more like how humans might think or do things in some way. And it's been working on it for decades. You know, this is something that's been happening a lot, but it started to become part of our lives. So some famous examples of how it's progressed. In 1997, Deep Blue, the computer, managed to beat the chess grandmaster at chess. How exciting. At that point, Deep Blue was the 259th most powerful computer on the planet. To be able to beat a human at chess, you had to be pretty powerful. That's a lot of computing power. So that sounds like very impressive, but they need to improve on that. Chess is actually quite an easy game to teach a computer because it's got a lot of rules. So then they set their sights on the game Go, which is much more complex. And AI this time couldn't just have a load of rules and basically say, learn chess and get good at it. It had to make the computer actually learn itself. So they gave the computer some sort of software called AlphaGo, like millions of moves by really good Go players, basically. He gave it loads of moves, so these really good ones. And then it made it play Go against itself millions of times, which luckily computers can do very pply. And that taught it how to be better than the best world players of this game. So we're teaching computers how to think like us, basically. They're limited. So AlphaGo is really good at Go, probably not so good at doing the shopping, because it wasn't designed for that. And then we've furthered that. They've made them good at sort of online multiplayer games like Dota 2. There's all sorts of stuff where we're furthering the use. But what is this useful to us? Where do we see this in the modern age? Well, lots of people have got these smart speakers, smart assistant, digital assistants, home speakers. There's all sorts of ways of referring to them. But they have loads of stuff that's AI powered built into them. The voice recognition features, for example, which use AI to basically do what humans do, which is listen to words, process them, and work out what to say back. So we're getting some of this sort of future technology, and this technology is very much like HAL from 2001. This sort of talking back to you, can control stuff around type thing. But we've got it, lots of people have got it in their homes, it's reasonably cheap, lots of people have them. What else do we have? Well, your email client might start suggesting things that you might like to say. This is powered by AI. This is powered by the fact that we've all written things in our emails before. So we've had emails that say, are you free? And someone's replied yes, someone's replied no. And a not hugely clever sounding computer for this example, but it's clever in other ways, can do things like say, well, maybe you'd like to say, yes, I am free, because it's worked out that's what you've said. So again, it's like kind of automating something a human would have to do otherwise. So AI brings in this idea of automation, as well as some of the sort of more fun things like sort of voice recognition. It allows us to have more time to do fun stuff like play on a VR headset or play Animal Crossing or whatever, because we can automate some of the boring things. And there's loads of other technologies that we might recognize, smart home features, all the different kinds of devices we might have. We've got, smart TVs, drones, games consoles. There's just so much stuff out there that you can get.
There's all these technologies, all of them there that Siobhan has described, but we do need to think as well, does everyone have access to these technologies? Can we say that these are available to all? And one of the things that lockdown has really shown and brought into light is digital poverty as well as us relying on that. And we're all very lucky, aren't we? We're all tuned in here. We've all got access to the internet then, because we're watching this on YouTube. We've got a device where we can watch a video on that and we can engage in this digital world. But that's not the experience of everyone. And that's not the experience of everyone globally, and it's not the experience of everyone here in the UK. We do have digital poverty, which is very prevalent in our society. Just looking at some of these statistics I've got up on the screen here, you know, 3.7 billion people are digitally excluded worldwide. Just think about what that would mean when we're in lockdown, or even before in lockdown, your daily life, how much you're engaging with the internet, how much you're engaging with your digital devices. You know, you'll probably touch your mobile phone more than you'd hug a loved one in a day. Certainly, you know, you're interacting with these so much. So not having that access is really excluding people. Here in the UK then, 13 million people in the UK lack the digital skills they need for work then. So the basic digital skills, that access to technology. So once places closed and we were relying on remote working, that's really going to have an impact on a lot of lives. And there's also this statistic here that 6.9 million people in the UK will remain digitally excluded if nothing is done to help them. So this is something that we really do need to think about how we address this digital poverty, how we can take that from this digital poverty to this digital equality. What can we do to transition from that? And why do we need to be doing this? You know, what is that impact? And it is something that we need to reflect on. So the Good Things Foundation do a lot of work in this area to help people get access to things, to think about how we can improve this as a society to ensure that everyone has equal access. And what they draw out here is digital inclusion is a social issue. And I think maybe with lockdown that brought it even more to play because it was our only way of socializing as well. But they say a lack of digital skills and access has a huge negative impact on a person's life, leading to poorer health outcomes and lower life expectancy, increased loneliness and social isolation, less access to jobs and education. And we can really feel that and currently of whether you wouldn't be able to tap into your online lessons, whether you weren't able to apply for jobs and things like that due to that lockdown and not having access to these technologies. As well, they go on to talk about people who are digitally excluded lack a voice and visibility in the modern world as government services and democracy are increasingly online. Now, this goes back to the point Siobhan brought up in terms of AI. And AI learning from data sets. If we've got a whole group in society who aren't online, who aren't able to engage with these digital technologies, that's a whole data set that these new technologies aren't designed to include them. It's excluding them yet again at the next level of being able to understand in that voice recognition, being able to predict how that group of people might respond to an email and that kind of thing. So it starts to build and build. And what's even more worrying is that this is the disadvantaged groups in society that tend to be the people who haven't got access to the internet. So maybe through age, education, income, disability, or unemployment. So we're seeing this increasing divide, this widening of this divide of people who have access and those who don't have access, and those who are included and those who are socially excluded. But it doesn't need to be like this. You know, we're being about positive today and thinking about how we can improve these things. We have to recognise that there's digital poverty and digital inequality so we can move to digital equality, so that we can think about ways that we can include all in this society so everyone can have the benefit and joy of these digital technologies that we engage with. So some steps towards digital inclusion and equality then is access to devices, enabling people to be able to have access to a device if they don't own one. So in the UK, with the first lockdown, public libraries closed. But public libraries are a great source of people being able to get online, get support, borrow even devices. Lots of public libraries will loan out tablets, an iPad or something like that, which is loaded up with digital books, digital media that you can take away and engage with that. So in the second lockdown here in the UK, libraries were seen as an essential service, so people could have access to them. Another thing then that we need to have access to then is the internet. So universal internet access. So the UN has recognised that access to the internet enables human rights. So governments should do the most that they can do to enable people can access the internet. It shouldn't be blocking that. It should be something that we can get to. And in Finland, since 2010, they've had a legal right to access to broadband. So things like this are happening, that people are able to access that cheaply available broadband rather than relying on expensive mobile data or maybe no data whatsoever. And the final thing as well is those skills to enable people to be able to work. I mentioned in the UK, we have 13 million people who don't have those basic digital skills. So there's lots of free training available. Once again, the public libraries provide this. I've mentioned the Good Things Foundation. So there are these things that are taking place that can help us move to that digital equality.
Yeah, so access is important, the skills are important, but another aspect of this is important too, and that is confidence. It's one thing having skills, but it's another thing having the confidence to put those skills into action. I might be confident enough to understand that this thing up here is a menu, and that if I want to do some copying and pasting or selecting all, I can go to the edit bit and I can go down the menu and choose various things. But I might be terrified that one of the things that I'm going to do is going to delete everything. And if I click on delete everything, I delete everything. Now, actually, in real life, we don't tend to have big buttons that delete everything. So part of the confidence of not being able to delete things is knowing that you can't really break it. Sometimes we can break it. Sometimes there are little options there that are going to damage things in ways that we don't expect. But generally speaking, it's very hard to break stuff. However, we might learn how that menu system works and everything is lovely, but then somebody changes the process. So for instance, nowadays, we might have these little hamburgers in the top corner. So if you're using a mobile a lot, you'll get these little 3 parallel lines where the menus are. And it's fine if you've seen the introduction of that technology and you've understood the introduction of that technology and you've interacted with those little hamburgers. But if you've not been using your smartphone, you've not had a smartphone, and then suddenly everything starts using these weird little 3 parallel lines that you've never seen before, that's a bit confusing, and you need the curiosity to click on that thing. It's a bit like, I suppose, back in the 80s again, because I keep going back to the 80s for some reason, I was the only person in our household who knew how to program the video or to set the clock on the microwave. Why was it me that was in that position? Was it just because I was the one person who bothered to read the instructions, or had I picked up some grammar of how these devices tended to work? In the same way that understanding the grammar of the menu structure, be that the bar at the top of the screen or these little 3 parallel lines of a hamburger menu, or understanding how remote controls generally looked, or understanding that those 2 buttons, you had to press them in some combination to get the clock to work. So let's just press them and see what happens. Again, with that confidence that none of the combinations are going to make the microwave self-destruct and set fire to the kitchen. So there's a lot of this working with these skills is all about confidence to use those skills, and that confidence comes with familiarity. And so one of the things that we have to guard against is becoming less familiar, like that point that all of us reach in our lives where we stop paying attention to the charts and the new music that's taking place, and suddenly we'll be completely out of touch with the world of music, and all we're listening to is Radio 2. And perhaps we need to guard against that kind of thing in terms of digital technology. Perhaps we need to maintain that curiosity.
Well, that's an interesting point, because we talked about digital skills there. You've mentioned about the ability to actually use, the menu and copy and paste. And that's like a really key digital skill. Actually, lots of people, they discover how to copy and paste, and it's really useful, saves you having to type things out again and again. And we have a kind of idea about digital skills, I think. I mean, it was mentioned in lots of the reports that Susan mentioned about the importance of people's digital skills and getting people to have those skills. But are they the only thing that really matters? And we've kind of already suggested that confidence is important. But what about the future? Going forward, what are we going to need? How do we know that? So if I went and searched online for the future of skills or looked on sort of news websites, there's often articles about the future of what skills people are going to need, whether it's often it's employment, but it might also be in life in general. And there's lots of ideas about these digital skills that people are going to need. There's lots of fears of a skills gap when people don't have these digital skills and they're going to need them. There's an idea this future is going to be really reliant on these digital skills. So like in the first picture on the left, you got this idea of people sitting in offices, computers, working together, and you need skills to do that. And there's also this kind of image about how you might need coding. The future is going to be all about computer code, maybe. Sort of that's people's image of computer coding. You see on the sort of middle picture there, this sort of scary looking thing. But there is this idea that coding is the future. Everyone's going to need to learn how to code or something. And maybe as well, we're actually all going to need to be robot engineers, because the robots will take over and the only jobs left will be fixing them when they break, until they make robot engineers. And then what will we have? It's all going to get very confusing. So that's some of the images we might have about this future of these digital skills, is this idea that you need more and more digital skills to keep up. But that might not actually be the case. So maybe that's not what's going to help us. Maybe it is this curiosity, this confidence to have a go, this ability to be flexible and try out things and stay open to new technologies, even if we don't understand them. Maybe some of it is about the willingness to go and find information. We've got this information at our fingertips. We're saying you can go on your phone, you can find anything. Maybe it's the willing to look at the instruction manual, ask somebody else, go on YouTube and find a how-to video. That's my dad's favorite way of finding any piece of information now. So there's loads of ways out there that we can be curious and find out information. We don't necessarily need to focus on this idea of having these skills. Can you code? Can you not code? That doesn't matter. We can keep up with the digital future just by being curious and having a go. But how do we know really what that future's going to be?
Well, I mean, I keep going back to the 80s, and in the 80s, we had a great way of knowing what the future was going to be, because we had a television program called Tomorrow's World on the BBC. And so part of what I did to prepare for this session this weekend, I was looking at a lot of videos from the BBC archive of old episodes of Tomorrow's World. And it's brilliant. It's fascinating stuff, and get me using internet resources to find all this stuff out. But yeah, so on this slide, for instance, there's the wonderful Howard Stableford, and he's demonstrating a portable electronic notepad in 1988. It's quite bulky, but it is the same technology that is now in a phone. It can do clever things with AI, like understand your handwriting if you train it. It is the technology we use today. It's just much bigger and not really as portable as you might have liked. Judith Hand there in 1982, using a telephone again to communicate with a computer, to get it to do things like change the heating or turn the lights on and off, in exactly the same way that we would with a digital assistant, with the device whose name we dare not speak, with those things where we got like the heating controls on our mobile phone. All of that technology turns out to be the best part of 40 years old. And yet suddenly it's become useful. The technology that Judith Hand was demonstrating was quite clunky. It required a big piece of kit that was very expensive, and you would have to ring it up and speak in the right tone of voice. But as these things get perfected and as things get smaller, they become more useful, and the technology finally catches up with the idea in a way. Let's have a look at some other predictions that got made, because really, what we see with these things like Tomorrow's World is we see ideas coming forward. We see an opportunity to imagine the future. So here are a couple of cases of people imagining what that future might be and sort of trying to invent that future by dreaming about it, basically. So the quote here is, is a guy who was the first person in Europe to have a home computer terminal. And that terminal was connected to a larger computer somewhere else. But it allowed his son to do his homework and things like that. And so Rex was predicting a future where every home would have one of these computer terminals and would be able to do all of this stuff and make notes and things like that. Now, what actually happened was that come the 80s, home computers became a thing. And these weren't terminals connected to a mainframe. These were computers in their own right with kind of processors and stuff, and they were able to do loads of exciting things. The internet aspect of this didn't really start to happen until the 90s. And now we are getting something a little bit closer to what was being demonstrated in 1967, because a lot of the technology that we use now aren't actually on the devices that we use. We use a lot of cloud technologies. This presentation over Zoom, we're using Google Slides to do the slides. That program isn't on our computers. That is all happening over the internet in very exciting ways. So we are starting in a roundabout way to reach that future that was being envisioned in 1967. The pictures in the bottom corner here, we've got the pub of tomorrow's world as it was imagined in 1965, where we would be phoning our order from the table rather than going up to the bar. And that was a rather fanciful notion that never really took off until last year, when suddenly human contact was frowned upon, and actually being able to use our phones to place our order suddenly became useful, became sensible, became a thing that we might actually want to do. I'm still waiting for the earrings that pick up radio, but we have earbuds and they've become a fashion accessory in their own right. So a lot of the things that are kind of predicted for the future, sometimes they don't really catch on for a long time. And it's only the circumstances that we saw before that really allow them to catch on and allow them to gain ground. Now, a lot of what we're thinking about at the moment is kind of a utopian view. It isn't just utopia, though. Thinking about the future allows us to think of all possible outcomes. In 1966, Tomorrow's World asked a bunch of children what they thought the future might be, what they thought the world would look like in the year 2000. And most of them didn't think that the world would look like much in the year 2000 because they thought we'd all be wiped out by atomic war. So thankfully, we did better than that. But a lot of the sort of recurring theme in what was being said by these kids in 1966 was this prediction that, well, basically robots would take over in a certain respect, that automation would put us all out of work, that we would have an economic crisis because we wouldn't have the jobs, because robots would be doing them. Computers would take all the sort of menial tasks away and we would be kind of stuck. And the only people who would have jobs would be the people programming the robots. So we find ourselves in a situation really where we can imagine the future, but imagining the future brings forward nice things, it brings forward troublesome things, and it brings forward things that keep coming back, keep recurring, keep actually being a genuine issue even now. 1966, they were thinking about computers and automation. And now in 2021, we're still thinking about automation as a significant issue.
So, you know, we've seen how people have imagined the future. We've heard all about tomorrow's world and which of those predictions did or didn't come true. But why are we imagining the future? Why is this useful? Why have we bothered to make this talk about imagining the future? So we've looked to the key thing in culture that imagines the future. We've decided to take a pause and look to science fiction, which is known. I mean, I've already made reference to science fiction. 2001: A Space Odyssey has already been my main reference point so far in this. Science fiction is our way of imagining different futures. And some of those are more realistic than others, but it has its uses. So we found this quite nice quote about why this is interesting and useful. So this is someone on Medium who says, "Science fiction is the telescope that looks into the future. Through science fiction, literature, and films, we are able to address technological change, existential risks, and cultural crisis that may define our future. This form of deep imagination is the ultimate form of preparation. It not only allows us to speculate what the future could look like, it also gives us tools to draw from when/if these or similar events actually take place. So what we're doing is we get the chance to prepare, to imagine different things, and to work out what we do if something happened. And by imagining futures, we can have reactions, whether it's now or in the future. So we might think, okay, we've imagined some sci-fi and we don't like the sound of that. It's more of a dystopia. What we can do, instead of thinking, oh, that's a bit scary, is think, well, what could we do to make sure that doesn't happen? So science fiction and imagining the future in different ways, as we're doing together right now, is a way of being prepared for what's going to happen, but also for, you know, taking action now and thinking about whether things would be good or bad and what we can do. Okay,
let's have a go at imagining this future. I'm going to see how I can imagine the future. So I'm really going to go for it. I'm imagining a future where there are kind of weird, probably genetically enhanced space squid, and they kind of float about in the air, and then occasionally they drop down a tentacle and it goes slap on our heads. And we've developed the ability to communicate with these squid through our sort of telepathic connections that we've built between ourselves and the squid. And so the tentacles latch onto our brains and we go thinking about things, and then those thoughts get passed through the tentacles through space and get transmitted to other people with their own set of tentacles slapped on their head. It's brilliant.
Can I just pause you there? Genetically modified squid.
Yeah. They float in the space, and we would just sort of communicate with them like that. It'd be great.
But it sounds to me, Steph, like your scientists were so preoccupied with whether or not they could, they didn't stop to think whether they should. You know, this genetic modification, squids in space. I mean, this seems a bit far-fetched, or it sounds like we might be creating Squid Park in space. I mean, dinosaurs in space are on my list, but, you know, like, I'm not sure about this.
They're not nasty squid. They're nice. It's not like the dinosaurs are going to, trample all over the place. They're kind of benevolent squid.
Well, but nature finds a way, you know. Do we know? Can we possibly know? I'm not sure about this future. I think there's some cautionary tales that we can take from other examples that maybe this isn't.
Look, I think you're not really getting the full benefit of my squid utopia that I'm building. But I mean, I suppose you've got a point. I mean, I guess with Jurassic Park, it's based on some sort of science, isn't it? You know, the getting the blood out of a mosquito and then using genetic sequencing and what have you to produce some little baby dinosaurs. And
it could happen.
I guess it could. Whereas my giant squid that float in space don't actually exist. I mean, they might exist. We might just not discovered them yet. They are invisible after all. But there's not really any sort of grounding at all there, is there? I'm just kind of making stuff up. So maybe we need to rein ourselves in a bit and imagine futures that are at least a little bit possible within our own frame of reference. Like all the Tomorrow's World stuff that we were looking at, there weren't any giant squid or anything. It was all kind of, here's some technology that kind of already exists, and we're just sort of looking forward to how it might change and be developed and embraced by society. So yeah, I mean, Jurassic Park is an example of that. Jurassic Park is taking existing or potential technologies that we can see within science and seeing whether they lead to a good place or a bad place. Whereas my giant squid perhaps is a little bit fanciful. It's reliant really on us discovering the giant squid that are invisible.
Yeah, so with that idea of maybe imagining futures that are possible, I feel that one of the things that I'd want to imagine then is based more on the values, not the technology. Actually, Siobhan picked up on this when they were talking about how we think about skills and being curious. Actually, can we think about things that aren't necessarily linked to the technologies that we might have, or genetically modifying a squid? You know, everyone can have their own version of the future here. We're reimagining it. But I think the future I want to reimagine is one where technology is human-centered and ethically designed. So one where we're thinking about those human rights, being respectful of that. So being respectful of our right to privacy, our right to free expression, our right to work, the beauty of being a human, you know, that we can all access it, that we're all able to use these technologies, that human effort is recognised, that things should be easy to use and should be accessible to all, whether you know, you have a disability or whether you don't, whether you're used to using technology or whether you don't. We can all use these technologies, and they're respectful of the human experience. And one of the things I think with these technologies, if we have that as our value for basing how we want to reimagine our future, these are the values we want to take forward, how can technology then fit into that and be something beautiful? And I love this quote from Indy, which says, technology that respects human experience is beautiful, magical and delightful. It just works, it's intuitive, it's invisible. It recedes into the background of your life, it gives you joy, it empowers you with superpowers, it puts a smile on your face and makes your life better. Now, if we can imagine a future where technologies do that, wouldn't that just be excellent?
So we're going to imagine these futures. You know, we've got some futures we're imagining, but how do we get there? How do we start asking the right things, doing the right things? What do we do? Well, I think we need to start asking questions. I think we need to ask some questions that will get us to work out these futures and also help us be flexible and curious. Because the future is not set in stone, unlike this picture of us set in stone. But what we're saying even is not set in stone. The technologies we've talked about tomorrow could all be changed into something completely different. The future is not set. So if we can stay curious, if we can keep imagining different futures and changing in response to those thoughts, changing in response to what needs changing, we might be getting in the right direction. If we imagine futures and then take action in the present to get towards them, that might help us to get towards those nice human-centered design futures, perhaps keep us away from the Jurassic Park type futures where the squids take over by, you know, taking action, thinking practically, but also asking those questions. Asking questions about what if, what could this do? What would happen if this thing happened? What could happen next? But also asking some critical questions to help us look at things. You know, what data is being used to get that there? What's happening here? Why did you think squids could do this? Asking these kinds of questions can help us adapt to this future, think about what we're going to do and stay curious. So that's really what we want to say to you to end this is, don't make digital technology good or bad. Don't see it as good or evil like we did like last time. Think of it as a chance to be curious, to imagine new things, and stay curious.
And if you want to stay curious, we have been presenting this through the powers of the internet, through YouTube. You can come back and be curious about us over and over again because we're here on the internet, on YouTube. Don't forget to like and subscribe. But if you want to find out more things and be curious about other things that have been happening with the York Festival of Ideas, then have a look at the other things that are on the account here. Go to the yorkfestivalideas.com website and take a look at the things that are on there as well. Be curious about loads of things. That's the whole point of the Festival of Ideas after all. So enjoy that curiosity. And thank you very much for listening to us.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.